I've got a laundry problem, too much to do and nowhere to store it. So I'm going to head down to my hardware store and I'm going to grab some good lumber, a 1x3 and 1x2s. Make sure you get them pretty straight. On 2 of these 8-foot boards, we're going to mark them right in half, a little bit above the 4-foot mark. Then I'm going to cut them. Now, we're going to set 2 of these legs aside because we're going to work on one side at a time. Take these 2 legs, separate them, and then we're going to start building a box. As you can see, I'm going to use glue. Glue is so strong compared to screws or nails. So what you do is you take good wood glue, you separate it out, put the board on top, and I'm just going to use little brad nails to hold it in place. This is going to allow the glue to dry, and it's going to be super strong. We're going to box this out, and then once we get the 2 sides built, we're going to measure the basket, and it comes out to about 24 inches. As you can see, that's how we have to separate it. Build the top and the bottom, again using the 1x3s. Just use these, and this could be a one-person job if you use a clamp to hold it in place on one side. Now, as you can see, the box is starting to form. If it's a little bit off, don't worry. We'll take care of that when it comes to sanding. We'll go on the other side, again using glue and a little bit of brad nails. Now it's time to build the top. Again, using 1x3s on the top, I'm going to do 5 of these. Again, as you can see, I got glue. Now it's time to build the racks and the sliders that the baskets will go on. I'm going to put some glue down again along the sides as I measure it out for 3 baskets, all equal sizes up and down. This one doesn't use a 1x3, uses a 1x2. We'll put this in place again with glue and using the brad nails to hold it in place. See that little bevel I put on the side? That's so it doesn't catch the basket. Here's the top. You can see the 5 slots that I put in. Now this is the facial board that I'm going to put in. It fits really nice, but we want to hold it in place again. This is where we can put little letterings or signs on. Using the brad nail, hold it in place. Once we do that, it's time to sand. Now, the reason you want to sand is it takes stain and everything better. But I've got a secret. We're not going to use stain on this. I'm going to use something different, but don't be intimidated. We're going to use a torch. That's right. We're going to burn this wood and give it a special look. As you can see here, I'm showing you that it can go too fast and it won't do the job. What you got to do when you're using a torch, don't be nervous, go a little bit slower. See how when we do that, it brings the grain out? It doesn't burn all the wood. It just takes that wood grain and really sets it apart, giving it a very dark look. Now, it looks like it could possibly be burning the wood. That's only temporary. It just gives it a nice shine, and then you can finish it off with some poly. Now, here is the final project. I used my Cricut machine, put a laundry symbol on it, and decorated it up, and it turned out amazing. 3 baskets tall and a little shelf on top to hold things. There's that bevel right there so the baskets don't get caught when I'm putting them on. And look at that. You can barely see any of the nails because we use glue to hold it together. With all the laundry in, it's still super strong. And it slides in and out with ease. It's great for the family, and they absolutely loved it. Laundry time now doesn't have to be a chore. I hope this inspired you to build your own DIY.
So to start off our laundry hamper, what I have here is a round piece of wood. This I actually repurposed. It was a stool that had broken, so all the legs had fallen off of it. I'm gonna use this. So first thing I'm gonna do is I don't like the way this was painted, so I'm gonna sand this down and take it back down to the bare wood. I'm going to be using my Ryobi Power Sander with some 80 grit sandpaper. When sanding my piece of wood, before I even picked up my sander, I made sure to remove any staples or nails from the surface. One staple or nail can ruin a fresh piece of sandpaper instantly. The paint on my piece of wood did sand off quite nicely, so I think it was just painted with an acrylic or latex paint. I continued to sand my piece until the paint was removed as fully as I wanted it, making sure that I also sanded the sides of my wood round because this will be seen on our laundry hamper. Okay, now with my piece all sanded, we are going to be staining this. I'm not too worried about sanding it perfectly down to the bare wood because I am going for that rustic beat up look. So you'll notice that I left a bit of the paint behind and I didn't really sand it down all that well right to the bare wood. It's not that big of a deal. So to stain my piece, I'm going to be using this Varathane wood stain in the shade Provincial. So I'm just going to rub brush the stain on using a foam brush. And this is just a handy little tip for those of you that don't stain very often. When you buy your stain from the home improvement store, about 10 minutes before you're going to use it, I like to take my stain container and with the lid on, I place it upside down for about 10 minutes. Because what happens when the stain containers sit around for a long time, all the color pigments sit on the bottom of the can and you don't get that true rich color. So you want to make sure that you get those pigments mixed thoroughly, and you can give it a good shake, but I just find flipping the can over and keeping it stored upside down for about 10 minutes really helps gets the richest color when I'm working with stain. Now that our stain is on, we're just going to give it a little wipe with the lint-free rag. And with stain as well, if you want a darker color, you just do a second coat of the stain. But I'm okay with this one here. And we also want to make sure that we do get the edges of our round as well. So we're just going to brush on the edges too. And then again, wiping that with the cloth. Okay, so we are going to give this a few minutes to dry, so I'm just going to set it aside and we're going to move on to the next step. Next, I'm going to be taking some galvanized wire mesh, and this is what we're going to be using to make the surrounding of our laundry hamper. But I do need to cut it down a bit. It's a little bit long. So what I'm going to be using for my laundry bag is a king-size pillowcase. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my pillowcase here. So I'm just going to size up how long I need to make my cage. So we have to take into consideration that we're going to be folding the end of the pillowcase over. So I'm just going to take the length of the pillowcase here, and that's how long I'm going to make the body of my hamper cage. So the length of my pillowcase, not counting the end that we're going to roll over, is 3 feet. So we are going to cut our wire cage to be 3 feet in height.
When working with the galvanized wire, I do recommend wearing gloves so that you do not injure or cut your fingers or your hands. The edges of the wire fencing can get very sharp.
In order to see how much we need to cut off widthwise, I'm just going to wrap it around my wood round so that I know how much I need to roll out. So this will give me an idea of how much we need here, and I can always trim off more later if I need to. I'm just doing a rough guesstimate here. I'm going to hold my finger there so I know where I'm cutting.
To cut the wire fence, I used a pair of wire cutters. You could also use tin snips as well to do this. Working down the length of the wire fence, I continued cutting into sections, just cutting it off really close to the piece where I was cutting. So the lengthwise wire, I made sure to make my cut close to that. This is important because if you ever want to reuse the next section of fence, you have that long pieces of wire hanging out to connect it to something. I continued to cut along until the entire fence was disconnected from the roll. I placed some heavy objects on the fence to keep it from curling back, and then I measured the 3 feet, which is going to be the height of my laundry hamper, and then I cut across the fence horizontally so that we have the right height for our hamper. I did this in the same fashion that I did to cut the width of the fence, just working along with my wire cutters. And it's important to note that I did keep the pieces a little bit longer this way. That is so that we have wire to wrap underneath of the wood round to attach it to our base.
Now the cut side is what we're going to use to attach our cage to our wood round because we have these pieces hanging off, okay?
To attach my base, I used a stapler, and all I did was just take those cut pieces and then I folded them in and stapled them down with the stapler. So I just worked my way around the wood round, going step by step, folding each piece of wire and then stapling it in place. The wire that I'm using is pretty pliable, so it folds really easily, so I was able just to use my finger to push it into place and then use my stapler to staple. If your wire is a lot tougher and you can't push it down with your fingers, you can always just use a pair of pliers to push it into place. Once I had my base securely on, all I had to do was attach the opening where the mesh wire meets. So all I had to do was take the off-cut pieces and wrap them around each other. To make sure that they're really secure, I just used a pair of pliers just to kind of crimp them together to make sure that they wouldn't come apart.
Next, I have these little caster wheels that I got just at my local home improvement store, and we are going to attach them to the bottom of our piece of wood. Now, these are the holes where the bottom of the stool went in, and they're evenly marked out for me, so it just worked out for me that way. So I'm just going to put my wheels right over those marks.
I used tiny screws and a drill to attach my wheels, and then once that was done and all four were attached, I could stand up my laundry hamper, and all I had to do was put in the laundry bag. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I am using a king size pillowcase, and I like the king size pillowcases because they're very long and they work perfectly for this project, but you could also buy a laundry bag if you can't find a pillowcase long enough. Once my laundry hamper was complete, I could put it in place in my home, and I am left with a gorgeous industrial piece of decor. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, I've always wanted one of these, but the real vintage ones are pricey and the high-end decor replicas are as well. I managed to make my own for half the price, and I can take pride knowing that I put it together with my own two hands. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this project, and I hope you will check out my site, hollygrace.ca, and my social media for more great ideas.
Thank you so much for tuning into Home Talk, and we'll see you next time.